Welcome to the Executive Forum at Purdue University's Daniel School of Business. I'm your host, Dave Randich, lecturer in the Strategic Management Department. Each episode, we invite accomplished executives and thought leaders to share their experiences, from building careers and navigating change to taking risks and shaping the future of business. Today, we welcome Tony Denhart, Executive Vice President of Talent and Workforce at the Indiana Economic Development Corporation. Tony leads the state's strategy to develop, attract, and retain the skilled workers that Indiana employers need. This role sits at the center of Indiana's broader economic agenda, partnering with business, education, and community leaders to design initiatives that upskill Hoosiers, connect talent pipelines to high-growth industries, and make Indiana a compelling place to live and work. Join us as we connect today's students with the insights and inspiration that drive tomorrow's leaders. Tony, thanks for joining us today.
Dave, I am super excited to be here. I guess first off, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity. Lou, thank you. Megan, I don't think Megan's been here, but there's a lot of people that made this possible, and first and foremost to the students. It is so exciting to come back to campus, to be with you. You know, the engagements that I've had this morning, any little nugget of information that I can provide and help better position you to be successful as you go down your career path is a win for me. So I'm super excited to be here with you today to have a conversation, to tell some stories and have a good time.
And so you got a lot of connections to Purdue, both for yourself, your family. Tell us about all that.
Yeah, it is close. I met my wife at Purdue.
What dorm were you in, did you tell me?
McCutcheon,
Yeah, okay.
on the top floor. And it was the Polytechnic Institute, so I had the longest distance. And yes, I had the 7:30 class on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, along with the 4:30. So I'd leave when it was dark, come back when it was dark. So met my wife at Purdue. So she's a proud, I'll say, Craner alum. She was, here when it was Craner, or the Daniel School of Business now, that I think the dean prefers to hear. Then we were really lucky that both our son, who's a Craner alum also, but Daniel School of Business, a few years back. And then our daughter graduated from the Purdue School of Nursing. So super excited. We're a true Boilermaker family, and it's been a wonderful journey out of the gate, and really an amazing foundation that Purdue has provided that really has got me here today.
And so not only are you part of Indiana Economic Development Corporation and looking into the whole job and labor market in Indiana, but you had a long career at General Electric, which is very famous for people development. You were involved in recruiting. You've been involved with Purdue. What do you want to tell the students about the world as you see it right now that they need to know?
How much time do we have?
We got
I know.
half hour.
Yeah. I'll touch on some things that are really important in my mind, and some steps I took, some dominoes that were placed in my career trajectory that I'm fully confident if they weren't placed, I wouldn't be here in front of you today. But one is, 2 or 3 years into my career, I was asked to come back to campus to support the GE recruiting team at Purdue, and I did that. And that was a journey for the next 20 years when I was within GE Energy. So my first 22 years, we were building things, heavy industry, paper mills, steel mills. So we would break fix, we would put, like at Subaru, we designed the electrical infrastructure when they expanded in '06. Steel Dynamics up in Butler, Indiana, we did the design, procurement, and installation of the drives controls. So that was my first 22 years. And what I got paid for was doing that job. But I had a side hustle for 20 years that really has got me here today. And I saw it as a competitive advantage to have relationships at Purdue that are deep and wide, across all the schools. Back then, GE was 13 businesses. When I retired, it was 3. A year later, it was split up. So we had a diverse mix of hiring needs, and Purdue, for a number of years, GE hired more students from Purdue University than any other university in the country. So as things went on, I volunteered, right? I was back on campus. I was then asked to lead the team, the recruiting team, as a volunteer, and that was focused on recruiting, relationship management, and research and development. And then I got a phone call, from corporate saying, hey, we'd like you to come to corporate HR and do what you're doing now full time across multiple universities across the country. What was my answer? Anyone? Yes, no, maybe? It was no thank you. And the hiring manager, I won't go into the details, but long and the short of it, he convinced me to do some due diligence, which I did. And I'll say I took a 180 and a 360, but I said yes. And there were a couple things. You know, you got to look at your foundational blocks that you're building yourself on. And there were two areas in which I thought that I could really strengthen. One was strategy, strategy development. In services, it's a lot of firefighting. While we had a strategy, it could have been stronger, in my opinion. And then comms marketing was another one. It's like, you know, how can we leverage that team to really differentiate ourselves? So I said yes, and I'm so glad I did. And so I'm an hour away from Purdue still, and this is my full-time gig, so I get to spend more time at Purdue. But then I also get to go to other campuses around the country. And I've got a meeting a little bit later with Jay Ackridge, who is a good friend, and there were a couple of people, Joanne Briette on the Board of Trustees. We would talk, and they were like, what's going on at other schools around the country? And so I would bring that back. So a year into that, and this is part of the journey that I think is important. It's like, you're putting those dominoes out. So I won't provide all the details, but there was an event in Cincinnati that I took a Purdue person to that, the timing was perfect, where our chairman and CEO, Jeff Emmelt, came up and saw her name tag and it said Purdue, and he's like, I owe you a visit. Well, 4 or 5 weeks later, Purdue University announced that Mitch Daniels was going to be the next president. And what I found out during that event was, Mitch had just been to meet with the GE board of directors. So I did some due diligence, and lo and behold, went to the event that night. There Pam and I are again. Here comes Mitch. And we're like, we were just with Jeff a month ago. He wants to come to campus. And there's a lot of dominoes stacking up here. So fast forward to October of the following year, a couple months before that, Indiana had been down selected for GE Aerospace's jet engine assembly facility. And these dominoes just keep coming. You get a call from the governor, well, he wants to meet with Jeff while he's here. There's a strategy behind this. I wanted Indiana to win, but all above board, right? So there's a lot of things that are going on. And today, during that process, who did I get to meet? The Indiana Economic Development Corporation. So fast forward to the fall of 21, and I ran into a couple people that I knew, and I said, I'm likely going to retire at the end of 21. 2 days later, I get a phone call, and it's like, have you or would you consider working for the Indiana Economic Development Corporation? Well, let's have a conversation. 4 weeks later, I said yes. Started the first part of 22, and here I am today.
Excellent. And with the Indiana Economic Development Corporation, you and your peers and team are making sure that Indiana is a good place to build factories, start companies, retain employees. So you're focused not only on making sure Indiana continues to serve our industry partners well, but also attract new partners.
Right.
And so as you're out there selling Indiana and working these processes with governors and mayors and so on, what are the strong positives for Indiana that you're selling? And what are some of the things you gotta work on?
Yeah. So one thing I will say, workforce. It is your economic development strategy. Without workforce, we're not successful. You can give all the incentives you want in the world to get a company here, but if you can't get the workforce inside of those four walls, in the roof and the ceiling, that's one piece, but what's it take before then? You got to build the place. You need the skilled construction workforce. You need the project managers for those companies. There's a lot that goes on there. So Dave, a few points. One is, when you look at advanced manufacturing, the state of Indiana leads it. We're the most manufacturing intensive state per capita across the country. At least one of the top 1 or 2, maybe 3. We're in the top 3 for sure. That's important. We're the crossroads of America. About half the population is within an hour of Indiana. That's important. GE Aerospace, I could name company after company, but GE Aerospace wanted to be close to 65 so they could get their engine once it was assembled over to Ohio to be tested, And the hot section that was going over to Saint-Fran in France would go up to Chicago or Indianapolis, hit a plane and go. It was very important to be by 65. Higher education was also very key. And if you look at SK Hynix, Purdue is a big reason that they picked West Lafayette, Indiana. We build, we move, we're known for that. What we also have to keep in mind is how we keep that going from a talent standpoint, density of talent, so that we can provide that. Now, what's the opposite side, Dave? Like, where do we fall short? Where do we have really, it's not how we really fall short, but what are our areas of improvement? And you look at your career, you're going to have that too. What are those development opportunities? So one, we've got to keep a laser focus on workforce. And it spans not only the company, but like I said, the skilled construction workforce. And that's partnering up with institutions like Purdue University, all 35 higher ed institutions, K-12, the local and regional economic development organizations, community and faith-based organizations. Really, it doesn't happen without Team Indiana. There's not one entity that makes it happen. You look at the Greater Lafayette Commerce, an amazing partner. I could go on and on with those partners. This morning in one of our conversations, we were talking about brain drain. Indiana is at the top of attracting you, students, to the state of Indiana. We've got work to do on keeping you here. And it's not to say that we want to keep you here, each and every one of you here, because we do want some of you to go, learn, grow, experience, but we want you to come back. There's a lot of people that go away that are from Indiana or close by, but they've got to experience Indiana. You know what they say? It's a great place to live. It's a great place to raise a family. It's cost effective. That's another reason companies come to the state of Indiana. It's a good cost of living here. It's business friendly. So that's some work. Daycares, we've got to do some work there. And the name is I'm going to draw a blank, but I'm going to try to get it back. But what was it, back last fall from White Group?
White Lodging?
White Lodging. Mm-hmm. One of the things that he brought up during the discussion is like when they're building hotels, but really he brought up housing. You get some of those individuals working in the hotel that's in downtown Indianapolis, they can't afford to live in that area. But from a state of Indiana and really across the country, we've got to really focus in on housing, affordable housing, the appropriate part of housing. The other thing I'll say that, we're really a leader in the state of Indiana. It's our READY program where the state's invested $1.25 billion on quality of life, quality of place. So think trails, investing in arts and culture. And not only is that a $1.25 billion investment, which $250 million is from the Lilly Endowment, there's a matching piece to it. So that total investment is going to be $20 billion in that space. No other state's doing it.
And Tony, I know that across the country, from my business travels, all states are confronting the same issue. Mm-hmm. How do we attract and retain good employers with good jobs? And we know the stock market's doing well, the economy's doing well, and yet we hear about the affordability crisis, we hear about not enough good jobs, tough job markets, companies can't find people.
Right.
What's the disconnect? Sorry to stump you if I did.
No. There's some conversations we had this morning that, one is, and maybe let's just zoom into the college students.
Okay, let's talk about you guys going out and getting a job. Yeah.
And one is, there's a lack of awareness of the opportunities. We, and in many states, we've got to do a better job of bringing awareness, and I'll start after college. There are many companies, for example, in the state of Indiana, small and medium-sized companies that would afford individuals, whether you're coming out of college or you're experienced, great career opportunities. It's just, there's no connectivity there, so we've got to do a good job there. From your front, the Daniel School of Business, 96% placement for the last cycle, so doing awesome. Some will say the market's softening a little bit. Others will say it's going to turn out really, really well. But what I hear is there's a lot of companies coming to campus and the students aren't showing up at these events. And, we could go deep into networking. I would say, one, the fact, I know this is a class, but you're here, you're engaging, but what's your strategy? What's your long-term plan? What's your short and long-term plan? What companies do you want to go after? Who should you be connecting with? Are there any Purdue alums at that company? If the company's coming to campus, it may not be billed as or touted as a recruiting event, but here's one thing I'll tell you. Every time anyone from GE was at a university, but we'll just zoom into Purdue, we were always recruiting. We always had our recruiting lens on. And I don't know how many years ago it was, but John Kranicki, who was the president and CEO of GE Energy and vice chair of the company, was at the forum when they did the presentation style.
Of Kranicki Center here?
Yeah, in the Kranicki, yep. He had his eyes open. He was talking to students, and trust me, I know, because I got the list and the names, like, follow up, Tony. So that's a piece of advice that I will throw out to you, that always be on from a recruiting standpoint. If there's an opportunity to engage with the company on campus, do it strategically. You got to know what you want to do when you grow up, which I'm still trying to figure out. But have a strategy. Go after it. Be prepared. Have plan B and C, because A may not work out.
When I was managing a company in Indiana, my best recruits were people in their late 20s who grew up in Indiana, went to Chicago or Indy or somewhere else to have fun.
Yeah.
Had kids, came back for Grandma and Grandpa to be babysitters, and they were my best employees. For Purdue students who may or may not want to stay in Indiana immediately, or they may want to come back, what are the great opportunities, what are the great industries in Indiana that students ought to be looking at?
It's a great question, and I'll maybe answer it two ways. Indiana, one, that comes top of mind, life sciences. You look at Eli Lilly's investment of $11-12 billion down in Lebanon. Ag is always going to be here. Defense is here. But what didn't exist 4 years ago? Semiconductors. That industry did not exist in the state of Indiana. EV, the Star Plus Energy investment in Kokomo, Indiana, which there was some news earlier this week that said it wasn't, that they were going to change things around, but that was for other locations. Then the other one, you look at hyperscale data centers. Meta just broke ground earlier this week on a $10 billion investment that's south of here. Amazon, AWS just announced a $15 billion investment up in the region in Northwest Indiana. So there's some emerging industries that are happening in the state of Indiana, but we also have those foundational industries and companies in the state of Indiana. So when I look across Purdue, starting with the Daniel School of Business, there's a job, there's a place for each and every one of you in Indiana. And again, I know we're not going to keep each and every one of you, but there's an opportunity. You look at SK Hynix investing, almost $4 billion a couple miles away. They're going to have up to 1,000 jobs, a great opportunity in, a AI space or a packaging space that just is continuing to grow and grow and grow. So what I would say, Dave, is those opportunities are endless in Indiana if that's where you want to be or you want to come back to. But what I'm going to tell you is Indiana wants you.
These construction companies managing these projects must be looking for people, I would think.
Dave, so day 11, January of 22, I got the opportunity to pitch workforce out to Stellantis, Samsung, and SDI up in Kokomo, or down and over from where we are right now. And it was, it was the first, day 11, and I'm going to tell you, I was nervous. Fortunately, they didn't drill me, but I had a partner next to me that would have supported me and helped out. But I got back to the office, and I asked the question, who's going to build it?
So what do you mean they drilled you? What would that mean?
Well, I didn't know how deep they were going to go on questions around workforce and talent in the state of Indiana. While I knew it from a GE standpoint, I didn't really know it as well as I do today from a state of Indiana standpoint.
Yeah, okay.
But I'm back in a leadership meeting, and I just said, I'm the new kid on the block. Who's going to build it? And I got some blank stares. And even some of my peers, it was 4 months later, and I finally understand what you were saying about it. I lived that world for my first 22 years. And so what did I do? It's like, who's the domain expert in this space? And someone said, you need to call Chris Price with the Indiana Construction Roundtable. And that organization represents both the merit side of the non-union and the union side. And I don't care which side of the street they're on. We need them all because we don't have enough. But what are we doing strategically? And then from a workforce standpoint, we're looking out. When you look at these big, especially the big projects, we get the construction schedule and we overlay them so that we can be proactively looking out a year or 2 or 3 or 4 to understand where we're potentially going to have a gap or a bottleneck. But without the workforce and without the skilled construction workforce, economic development is not going to happen. So it's a partnership, supply and demand studies, whether it's Wilhelm Construction or Amazon Web Services or fill in the blank company, just having that consistent conversation with them to get a status update, what's working, what's not. And from a state of Indiana standpoint, there was a big concern that there was going to be a gap fourth quarter of last year with the demand in the electrician's trade. And here's what I'll tell you, Indiana delivered. Amazon built that facility in New Carlisle faster than they've ever built any other site in the world. So Indiana delivers.
So Meta, semiconductors, Lilly Data Center, Amazon, sounds like AI. And there's been a lot of disruption in the last few weeks. We've heard about AI for years now, but this year it's starting to hit a fever pitch. We've seen the stock market reaction. And it's not about ChatGPT and all that. It's about coding and what AI can do to automate work. From your position in workforce development, what do these students need to know right now in February of 26 about AI and how they integrate that into their strategy for job search and early career?
Dave, this was so important. I made some notes so I wouldn't miss anything. So one thing I want to share with you is in 4 years, this is from a study, 70% of the skills used in most jobs will change. Did you hear that? Just in 4 years, 70% of the skills are going to change. And we're going to probably jump back to change in a second. One of the fastest growing let me ask you this. What's one of the fastest growing skills employers want? Yes?
Soft skills like communication.
All right, Dave, we're done here.
Oh, right. All right. Thank you very much.
No, that is a great answer.
Something the machine can't do.
You're making it easy for me. Of the top 15 skills they want, 10 are soft. But what is the top one? AI. And it's not necessarily the coding side. It's not necessarily the data science side. But it's knowing how to use the tools and how to strategically solve problems, bring efficiencies. And I know things have evolved even in the last 6 to 12 months from an academia standpoint where, maybe faculty are loosening up a little bit. But if you're not using Gemini, ChatGPT, Claude, if you're not bringing that in as a daily, I won't say daily tool, but as a frequent tool, you're going to be set behind. When you have it, it's going to be a competitive advantage that you have. And you got to keep the guardrails up. You've got to keep ethics in there. You can't let it write your paper. You can have it give you some ideas. But it's knowing how to use it and strategically. And there's tasks. Can you get 5 hours back in a week, right? Can you automate some of the processes? I mean, I look at our compliance and audit team at the IEDC. I am fully confident that if we leverage the tool appropriately, we can be more efficient and accurate. I would love to be able to plug in, before it's publicly announced, a company, the workforce they're going to need, and ask it to build a workforce development plan that we can present to the company. But I can't do that. We don't have an inside AI tool to do that. I would have to do it with an external tool, and then I would potentially be putting the state at risk by exposing information. The other thing I would probably want to share with you is, a couple things. I'm not a writer. Ask anyone in my family. My brother's the writer. But there was a period of time recently that our team was tasked at writing some stories. And if you want, I mean, I was going to fail completely if I wrote the story. So what did I do? I took stories that had been written on the same topic, and I took the interview and the transcript, and you know what I did. I put the appropriate prompts in, and literally 5 minutes later, I had my story. I had to go through it. I had to edit it, and then I handed it to the comms team, and I said, I just want to let you know what I did. And it's like, I told you you shouldn't be using me to write the story, but here's how I did it. And the comms lead's like, it seemed like it was similar to what we wrote in the past, but this works. But you got to be doing it in the right way. Maybe a couple other things, Dave, just on top skills and things to be aware of. You know, in my GE career, I had 32 years of change. And you can either approach that as a glass half empty or a glass half full. And I encourage you to approach it as a glass half full. As Jack Welch, GE's former chairman and CEO, said, you control your destiny, have a plan. I did not plan to go to corporate HR at GE. I did not plan to come to the IEDC, but it's been a great plan, it's been a great ride. The change is going to happen. And you control your destiny, so you figure out what you're going to do, but don't let it get you down. That's the last thing you want to have happen. It will mentally impact you so much. Talked about giving back. You know, you got to pay it forward. You got to give it back to Purdue. And I'm not saying it's dollars and cents, but maybe you become a mentor after you've been out. Maybe you're coming back to campus to speak. And it will evolve. And I will tell you, it is one of the most rewarding things I get the opportunity to do is things like this and be involved at Purdue. You're going to have tough conversations. Navigate through them.
What's a tough conversation?
That's a great question.
You're fired.
Well, you're fired is one, or you're fired is one, or a tough conversation. Failure. Let's just talk about failure. Fail fast, fail forward. My second semester at Purdue was not a good one, and I had a little too much fun, and frankly, I did fail, it was Christmas break. Dad came home. It's like, did you get your grades? And I'm like, yeah. Like, let me see them. It was not good. And he told me I had 3 days to put a plan together to get this back on track. When he got home that evening, he's like, nope, you got till noon tomorrow to get your plan together. So I did. That wasn't a fun conversation with my dad, and even a tougher conversation with my mom when she got home that night. There were projects I had at GE. I had a project at the IEDC that was a couple of years ago. That was a bet we made. We were wanting to, it was about a retention of students in the coming to Indiana to get nurses to get students to come to Indiana to study nursing because a large percentage stay in the state. The other one was retaining students studying in engineering at Indiana schools. Well, we're maybe a year into the program, and it wasn't providing the return that it needed to provide to Hoosier citizens. So we pulled the plug. And I had to go have that conversation with the secretary and his chief of staff, and it was the right thing to do. So, while some of those conversations may be tough, the longer you wait to have them, the tougher it's going to be on the back end.
Tony, thank you so much for coming to the Daniel School today. Thank you. Thanks for tuning into the Executive Forum. To learn more about how the Daniel School of Business is helping students and organizations shape what's next, visit us at business.purdue.edu. Until next time, keep learning, leading, and building the future of business.